Welcome to another Jabba's Palace roll call. Today's character, Yarna Dal Gargan. Yarna was originally referred to as Gargan, or simply as Fat Dancer, in the credits for Return of the Jedi. Yeah, it's a little harsh. We first see Yarna when the droids enter Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. I've bumped up the brightness here a bit so you can see her. Later, she dances with Oola during the Max Rebo Band's musical numbers. They even composited her into the special edition of the film right here, adding her to the horrible CGI sequence. But that's basically all that we see of her in the film. Some people may think of her as little more than a punchline, but like most denizens of Jabba's palace, she has a fully developed backstory. We need to look at the book Tales from Jabba's Palace to learn more about her and how she got to Jabba's palace. Her story is told in Skin Deep, The Fat Dancer's Tale by A.C. Crispin, and it's surprisingly touching. She was from the desert planet of Askajian, where she, her mate Nautog, and her 4 cubs were kidnapped by slavers. One of her cubs was killed in the process, but the rest of them were taken to Jabba's palace and sold into slavery. Her mate courageously stood up to Jabba, only to be sent through the trapdoor to the Rancor pit below, where he was killed. Yarna was made into a dancer at the palace, while her 3 remaining cubs were put to work at Jabba's Mos Eisley townhouse. Yarna claimed to be Jabba's favorite dancer, and the fact that she survived for a year in the palace seems to bear that out. Jabba even made her wear an uncomfortable headdress and wart makeup, because he said she reminded him of his quote-unquote mother. In addition, her species was capable of storing water in large quantities in their bodies to help them survive in the desert. And this is the actual cause of her bulk. Jabba required her to be as big as possible to please him. The story is set in the immediate aftermath of Jabba's death and the destruction of the sail barge, which sent the palace into chaos. Yarna was freed by Jabba's death, but had to make it across the desert to reach her cubs and buy their freedom with the money she had saved. She was helped by Doallyn, one of Jabba's guards. He was a hunter who had come to Tatooine to capture a krayt dragon to fight Jabba's Rancor, only to end up in Jabba's service after a drunken night. In fact, it's apparently this guy who was pushed down by Chewbacca as he and Bosch entered the palace. The pair took a speeder from the palace and set off across the Dune Sea. They grew close during the long journey. When they neared Mos Eisley, they ran headfirst into a krayt dragon. Luckily, Doallyn had studied their physiology, allowing him to dispatch the giant creature with a single blaster strike. In secret, he retrieved the valuable dragon pearls from the monster's stomach, but was badly injured by a reflexive swipe of the dragon's tail. As their speeder had been destroyed, Yarna picked him up and took him the rest of the way to Mos Eisley, a long and grueling walk through the desert. Not only was Doallyn injured, he was also running critically low on the Hydron-3 gas he required to breathe in Tatooine's atmosphere. After arriving in Mos Eisley, Yarna spent some of the money she had saved to free her cubs on the precious gas, thus saving his life. When he realized what she had done for him, he told her about the pearls. They freed the cubs and bought a spaceship, becoming free traders together. Her cubs had not yet been named, so she named her son after her deceased mate, and her 2 daughters, Luca and Leia, after the people who were responsible for her freedom. She even danced at Han and Leia's wedding later on. After reading this story, Yarna quickly became one of my favorite characters from the palace. But of course very little, if any, of this backstory existed at the time the movie was made. There hasn't been much merchandise made for the Yarna character over the years, although Kenner did come close to making a figure of her in its line of vintage action figures. The figure got most of the way through the design process before Lucasfilm apparently vetoed it, thinking, and probably correctly, that kids might not want to play with an obese exotic dancer with 6 breasts, although it didn't stop them from making a figure of this guy. They sculpted a full figure, including her elaborate outfit, which would have been made of rubber. There's even a rough design for a coin, hinting that she might have been part of the Power of the Force line. But alas, the figure was cancelled. She did appear on some Return of the Jedi Dixie Cups, along with Oola and everybody's favorite character, the Mole, now known as Tanis Spijek. At this point, she was known simply as Gargan. I often wondered if this wasn't influenced by the name Gorgon, which is another name for Medusa, the legendary woman with snakes for hair. They also made a tiny model of her in the vintage Jabba the Hutt throne room action scene model kit by MPC. It's really not that bad considering its size and the fact that it's made of plastic. Some people have also made some pretty credible custom versions of this character, but it wasn't until 2008 that Hasbro released the first actual figure of the character in its Legacy Collection line. The toy was a notorious peg warmer, that is, a figure that just hangs on the pegs at the store forever without anyone buying it. Still, it's hard to imagine them doing a much better job with a figure based on this character. The likeness is quite good, and her outfit is complex and well painted. She comes with a small drinking glass accessory, which is cool, although it means that one of her hands is permanently in a glass-holding pose, which isn't really fantastic for a dancer. She also has a small and incredibly bendy knife that fits in a sheath at her belt. Her articulation is a bit more limited than the typical Hasbro figure, and her rubbery skirt and headpiece further restrict her movement. You're not going to get a lot of elegant dancing poses out of this figure, frankly, but then again, she wasn't exactly the most graceful dancer in the film, either. The face looks a little odd at first glance, with skin color that doesn't really match the rest of the body, but in this case that's actually accurate. It does a reasonably good job of matching the wart makeup she was forced to wear. Overall, it's a very solid figure, and one that many people thought would never be made. Since this character doesn't have a very big fan base, it might very well be the last piece of Yarna merchandise for a very long time. By the way, we should also take a moment to look at the character of Doallyn, her companion. There's a little confusion as to just who he is in the film. I mentioned earlier that he was pushed by Chewbacca in this scene, but the character has also been identified as being on one of the skiffs above the Sarlacc pit, where he was attacked by Luke and presumably killed. The main difference is that the character in the palace was wearing black, while the character on the skiff is wearing white. Now in the story, Doallyn stayed behind at the palace rather than going with the sail barge, so this must be a different character on the skiff. But that hasn't stopped people from identifying the guy in white as Doallyn. Hasbro did release a figure of this skiff guard in the Black Series in 2014, and since this is the closest we're likely to get to a true Doallyn figure, I thought we should take a look at it too. He's a relatively simple figure, but well done. He's got the standard articulation you would expect, and includes a vibro axe and palace blaster, although he doesn't actually have a place to put the blaster when he's holding the axe, which is a little unfortunate. He works well if you just want another skiff guard, but I like to pretend that he's actually Doallyn from the story, about to go off with Yarna to start a new life, putting their time at Jabba's palace far behind them. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, congratulations! Why not click that like button and then watch some more like these? I'm slowly but surely adding to my Jabba's Palace roll call series, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss any. You can also interact with me on Twitter, I'm at MightyJabba, or you can visit my website at mightyjabba.com. Thanks very much for watching.